After sending Dallas home in a taxi, I wiped my tears with a handkerchief and marched myself back into the club to confront the woman. The bouncers welcomed me back in, and I immediately scanned the room to find her standing in a corner. Shockingly, she had a drink in her hands. I stomped my feet towards her, and she noticed me approaching but remained still. Her eyes averted my own when we were finally face to face.
Luisa, what are you doing here?
I barked.
I was invited.
Her light brown eyes directed at the floor.
By your father.
Luisa Salvador, Dad's maid, gardener, massage therapist, pretty much his Swiss Army knife secretary. A meek-looking woman who boasted an innocent beauty about her with her long, straight black hair and puppy dog eyes. She always aired a haze of anxious violet that somewhat irritated me, and for good reason. She was 8 months pregnant with my half-sibling, Luisa, the mistress that my father refused to hide. I pitied her more than anything.
You can't be here.
I continued berating, ripping the drink from her hands. My eyes peered down at her protruding baby bump.
Especially as you are now.
I'm sorry.
She said, her eyes finally meeting mine.
That wasn't alcohol I was drinking, if that helps.
I put the drink close to my nose to smell for alcohol in the beverage. It was some sort of fruity seltzer water. I wasn't sure why I even cared, but I still handed it back to her. She gave me a sheepish smile as she grabbed her drink, then rudely brushed by me into the dancing crowd. Dad was always so big about optics, yet let his mistress walk about all willy-nilly. I shouldn't care. I really shouldn't, but it burned me inside that my father was a lying, unappreciative hypocrite. I wanted to wait for the weekend to finally show him up, but my fury demanded that he heard me out right here and now. I noticed that he and Tessa were no longer on stage, and from the looks of it, not even amongst the crowd. I bullied my way into the middle of the dance floor to try to get a better view of him. My head was on a swivel eyeing for him, ignoring people bumping into me and even an occasional hand on my ass. I tilted my head up to see one of Dad's security guards standing in front of the entrance to the upstairs lookout. The lookout's blinds were covered, so I assumed that was where he was. I shimmied my way to the staircase and marched myself up until I finally arrived at the door. Before I could reach for the knob, the hulking security guard stepped in my way.
Sorry, Missy. Your father is in a private meeting.
He folded his arms across his body like I think a landlord would do when he needs his due.
If it's a meeting, then I am well within my rights to join him.
I slanted my head up to glare at him.
Now, step aside.
That was when I heard my father's voice raise. It startled me, but it seemed to startle the guard even more as he turned his head around, giving me the opportunity to slip by him.
Hey!
He yelped. It was too late, I realized, as I turned the knob and entered the room to find my father sitting across from the last person I thought I would see tonight.
Bag and bounce, watch it jiggle on me.
Mercury, why are you here?
Dad's aura was a mix of emerald green and scarlet red. It was a fluster I had never seen in him, opposing colors and emotions battling for authority, almost creating an unsightly hue of muddy brown.
Sorry, boss. She slipped right past me.
The god tried to explain.
I'll see her out ASAP.
Please do.
Dad agreed, picking up his drink sitting on the mahogany ottoman in front of him.
Please don't.
Everyone turned their collective heads to the woman on the other side of the ottoman. A lump formed in my throat as I watched her cross one elegant leg on top of the other. We were in the presence of Senora Paola Sanchez, the drug cartel queen of South America. I had only officially met her once before, and even then the aura that she produced was always the most powerful one in the room. Her waft was a wild midnight blue that would engulf any other aura in its vicinity. A nightcrawler of a color that could weave its way into every orifice in your body, enchanting you with its dominance. The blue clashed heavily against her wild red dress that hugged her augmented curves. Her breasts almost looked like they would burst out of her dress like a can of biscuits if she decided to inhale. Standing behind her were two men the size of elephants wearing matching black suits and shades, probably her own bodyguards. She pointed her right index finger at me, showing off her gaudy jewelry and long nails.
Mercury, please have a seat.
Her heavy Hispanic accent ordered as she signaled me with her finger to come closer. I turned my eyes to my father, watching as he poured himself another glass of vodka until he nodded his head for me to do as I was told.
Xavier, please lock the door on your way out.
Dad commanded the guard, then drank from his glass. The guard left us and I felt the tension in the room rise to an astronomical level as I made my way to Senora Sanchez. I feared I would suffocate from it if I even opened my mouth. All of the energy and bravado I arrived with to tell Dad off escaped my soul as soon as I took my seat next to her. Dad was all alone on his side of the ottoman, flitting a look of stoicism. The few seconds he stared at us felt as if time were at a standstill. I had never felt so uncomfortable.
So, Senora Sanchez, how do you know my daughter?
He finally asked, leaning forward.
Ilios, please.
She placed her polished hand on my lap.
It is my job to know the daughter of my biggest vendor, especially one so gorgeous.
I was still facing my father as she turned her head to face me and took my hand. She planted a wet kiss on my hand, leaving her red lipstick lip print as a souvenir. Dad's face remained stoic as he took another sip from his glass, then gently put it back down on the ottoman.
Senora Sanchez, can we please continue our discussion?
Mercury, honey,
Senora Sanchez grabbed my face and turned it to her.
what do you think of your father's interior design choices for his clubs? I've always had a difficult time agreeing with the pink and black color palette. It reminds me of those dreadful cell phone commercials.
As I stared into the dark, empty eyes of Senora Sanchez, her intimidating beauty freezing me in thought, my mind was in a jumble as I tried to spit out a worthwhile response. That was until my eyes glanced down at her dress. My face still squeezed in her hand, I managed to mutter.
I would have preferred more of a coquelicot red than pink.
She removed her hand from my face and began clapping like a giddy schoolgirl.
Birds of a feather.
She then turned her attention back to Dad.
Ilios, you really should consider changing it. Your girl obviously has an eye for colors.
Dad's eyebrow rose slightly.
Oh, you don't say?
There was an edge to his tone that I had never heard before, and it made me uneasy. What could they have been discussing before I arrived?
So,
Senora Sanchez broke the momentary silence.
what was it that you needed to tell your father so badly that you just had to barge in on our private meeting,
Her hand was once again on my lap. Dad's eyes trained on Sanchez's as hers were on me. If looks could kill, Dad's would have tied Senora Sanchez's legs to a bag of bricks and had her swimming in Mykonos beach.
Well,
I began, considering my choice of words carefully.
I wanted to personally congratulate Dad for another addition to the Aphrodite franchise. Also, I have a surprise for him this weekend on the Intercontinental.
Senora Sanchez clapped her hands again.
Ooh, a surprise? I love surprises. I did plan to attend this year, however, something came up. Even still, my Mercury color me intrigued.
Cutting her eyes towards Dad, she picked up her glass from the ottoman. She raised it in the air, and one of her guards poured her a drink. Then she took a light sip. Senora Sanchez gave an exaggerated loud sigh before putting down her glass.
Per usual, I will have a representative in lieu of my absence for this year's event. Now, my Mercury, please be a dear and bid your father a good night. The adults have much to discuss.
She shooed me away with a majestic wave of her hand. I shot up from my seat and approached Dad. I leaned in and pecked him on his cheek.
Good night, Daddy.
His eyes still burrowed onto Senora Sanchez.
Good night, Mercury.
With Godspeed, I hurried my way out of the room, the bruising guard from before giving me a side eye that could penetrate a bank vault. I ignored him and walked towards the banister, staring down at the rabid partygoers. One thing was for certain, I always thought pink and black worked well together.